Hey, welcome everybody. It's good to see you here. It is Wednesday. It is 4 p.m. Pacific. Let's do some Starfinder Wednesday. Why don't we? We are going to be doing a deep dive into a couple different things here. Last week we had a show that was all about the playtest for the Character Operations Manual for Starfinder. If you missed it, you can watch that right up here. I'm putting a link right up there that you can click on, and you'll be able to go to that. However, today we're doing the first of 3 shows that are dedicated to the new classes that you're going to find in the Character Operations Manual, and today's the Biohacker. And to do that, we've got some guests here. Everybody welcome Jason Keeley and Owen K.C. Stevens to the show.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hi, folks.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Thanks for being here. I've got some questions from the message board, which you can find a link to down on the bottom down there if you'd like. To get things rolling first, though, I have a thank you I have to do before we can start. So we the other day I was streaming with Squiddish, the guy that does the stream for Pathfinder on Mondays, the 2 Perception show. And I was streaming, playing a game, and I had mentioned that we had a slot open in our emotes that we had unlocked. And his community got together, and they all got super happy about trying to figure out what emote maybe they could help us figure out what goes in there. And one of the guys on Twitch, he goes by Someone is his username. And on Discord, his name is Dingaling, and he is a really, really cool guy. Basically, the chat figured out that we should do a Paizo thinking emote. Thinking. And he went and grabbed our other emotes, did a mock-up, put it together something, and said, hey, I just did this real quick, but I thought maybe you could use this. We took it to our guy Adam that does all of our emotes, and he thought it looked great. He did a wonderful job with it. So Adam cleaned it up, used our assets to put it together, but didn't really change much of anything and put it together, and it looks great. And there, yeah, Thirsty's putting it up there for us right now.
Yep, there it is.
The Gollum thinking emote. So a little muffin, how are you? Thanks for joining us. So yeah, so I just want to say a big thank you to someone in the chat on Discord. His name's Dingaling. He did such a nice job for us, and so I wanted to extend a thank you for that. And people are putting that in there, and so I liked it. I'm sorry I didn't want to take too much time.
No.
But I really appreciate it.
It's great when the community's involved like that, and we really appreciate it.
It is really amazing.
And that's an awesome emote.
So anyway, thank you very much. Today, Biohacker. We're talking about this thing. So again, just to kind of recap, if anybody happens to have missed the news, we announced a playtest for the Character Operations Manual. There are 3 classes that we're adding to this playtest.
Yep.
We've got the Biohacker, we've got the Vanguard, and we've got the Witchwarper. And what we're doing is each show, this week is the Biohacker, next week is the Witchwarper, and then we're taking a break because the holiday, and then the first show in January is going to be the Vanguard.
Where we'll finally get Joe Pacini on the show.
Finally, there's going to be much rejoicing in Starfinder Wednesday land because I've been trying to get Joe on the show for a long time. Joe is a great guy. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about all of them. It's going to be good. In between there, we've got a non-Q&A show that's coming up on the week of Christmas that we're going to be recording tomorrow, hopefully, that we can put up. There won't be Q&A, but there'll be a fresh show on that Wednesday after Christmas. So that'll be good.
What a delightful present. To get
right
for the holidays.
And before you even ask, I didn't save the receipt. I'm sorry. You got to keep that one. So let's talk about this. The Biohacker.
Yeah.
One of the 3 classes that are in this playtest. Why don't we start with a nice overview of what people can expect from the Biohacker?
So let me leap in and say that and we've said this before, we didn't mention it now, that Jason wrote the first draft of the Biohacker. So we have the creator of the Biohacker rules here. And that's not to say this all isn't a team effort, because it is, but he was a big part of the team for that one. So, Mr. Creator,
yes,
what can we expect from a Biohacker?
Hold on, let me get into character here real quick.
Here we go. Yeah,
you've got
we have visual aids.
You've got
this
costumes.
Week. Okay, we do not promise to bring a shield when we're doing the Vanguard. But,
the Biohacker.
There we go.
The Biohacker is, of course, a sort of science-based class that works with a lot of our injections, weapon special property, and can aid and his allies and hinder his foes with science. With science!
And that's got I'm assuming it's got a lot of fake blood on.
You're welcome to assume whatever you want. Yeah.
Exactly.
Fake blood.
I'm not going to say anything.
No,
I plead the fifth.
That's probably the best advice.
Yeah.
And there's the question whether it's fake blood or is it just not human blood or is it just not something that we want to record what we're admitting what it is.
See, it's these intricacies that you get into that make it very awkward. Because just because it's not fake blood doesn't mean it's human blood.
No.
Exactly.
Okay, so you have a background in.
That's true. Yes.
Okay.
So when we decided the 3 classes that we were going to do, I was very excited to jump in and try to write the first pass on the Biohacker because I used to want to be a scientist. In high school, I had some really great science teachers. I actually had a teacher whose last name was, I kid you not, Panic. Spelled a little differently, but he was my AP Chem professor, and he was a chiropractor, and he taught us all sorts of fun science experiments. I was like, yeah, science is cool. I'm going to go to college for science. And I went to the University of Delaware for 2 years with a biochemistry major. And it was fun. We had again sort of start off with
he was getting a biohacker degree.
I was getting a degree in biohacking. My freshman year, I had a real fun chemistry professor who used to be able to gargle liquid nitrogen and do all sorts of other sorts of Mr. Science stuff.
You say that like that's a skill.
It is a skill.
It is a skill.
Isn't that just more luck? Like that you didn't get.
Oh no, that's why. No, it's science.
It's science because it boils at such a low temperature that when you gargle it kind of just it boils so fast it kind of hovers right there above your flesh and it doesn't touch it doesn't touch you on the inside.
Now you'll note that he said he used to be able to do that.
I don't know. I did not used to be able to do that. My professor did.
Right, but your professor used to be able to do it.
I mean, he was an older gentleman. He might have passed since then, but
or he might just have frozen his neck out.
Might have frozen his neck. So it was all fun. Had a great, it took math courses to get into the math of all that, biology and chemistry and biochemistry.
And then what happened, Mr. Keeley?
Well, then between my sophomore and junior year, I spent the summer working in a lab, kind of as an intern, a lab there at University of Delaware.
Was this a waterproof lab?
Let me get to that. Doing science, basically with a grad student working out, and I found out that there's a lot of waiting in science.
Waiting around.
Waiting around.
Okay.
You have to, because there are machines involved, and you put a sample in the machine, and then you've got to wait for it to do its thing, and then record the results. So I had a lot of late nights. Just changing samples out of the machine. There was this one machine which needed to have running water poured through it, essentially. So you'd hook a tube up to the faucet, hook the end of the tube up to the machine, and then another tube out the other end of the machine into the sink. Turn that faucet on, it cooled the machine down so the results weren't skewed in any way. Spent an afternoon, a long day doing samples and that, recording the results, and then I left the lab.
Okay.
You'll notice I didn't say that I turned the water off.
Did you skip a step there, my friend?
I might have skipped a step. I might have forgotten to turn the water off. And at some point, the hose leading into the machine must have come loose.
Oh, no.
And then water just started spilling out. Well, it must have. I just know that I didn't do it. Spilling water all over the floor, and eventually, the grad student I was working with was there that late, and he scolded me the next day for flooding the laboratory.
So you flooded the lab?
Yes.
Okay.
Not to the ceiling or anything like that.
How much water are we talking?
All these labs had drains in them.
Covers your shoe, like if you stepped in it.
I didn't see the results or what happened. So, but apparently it was enough to make someone in another part of the lab notice that their feet were wet.
So in chat right now, they're like, anyone else picturing the Sorcerer's Apprentice? And that is exactly what I'm picturing.
A little bit.
Now, like that's the perfect picture.
It's the Biohacker's Apprentice. But yeah.
That exact same summer, I was doing a lot of theater as well, and I decided I liked that a lot better. So I got out of that biochemistry degree, got an English degree with a concentration in dramatic studies, and that eventually led me here. And that's my backstory, everybody.
And that's why we had him write the Biohacker.
So I was excited to take what I remembered from science and chemistry and biochemistry and biology,
especially the accidents,
and try to apply that to a fun class.
So then, so let's talk about that. So when it comes to the background that you have and all of that sort of thing, and I'm sure a lot of this can kind of make more sense after we chat about the Biohacker at length a little bit more.
Sure.
To talk about what it does. But right off the bat, what were some of the things from your past that you were able to throw in there and be like, oh, this is great?
Like just sort of, I didn't get to take any, I didn't get into specifics because a lot of those things get kind of named after people who obviously don't exist in the Starfinder universe. But you know, thinking about like all the different aspects of biochemistry, I was involved in a lot with like protein folding and stuff like that. That didn't necessarily make it in, but like going into the generalities of like, you know, genetics and neurotransmitters and enzymology and that sort of thing. Were words that I definitely wanted to use, right? And figure out how that would work in the game.
And I think an important part of where his experience came into this draft is that Jason discovered the very important difference between the fun imagining what science would be like that is exciting and interesting and what real science is like. And for the same reason that we do not, for example, get into astrophysics when you are flying a starship around in Starfinder, because our guess is for most of our audience that will not be fun. The Biohacker is not designed to be any kind of statement about real world genetics or biochemistry, or very important and in many cases fascinating stuff, but we don't want you to have to pick up a thesaurus or have 2 years of biological chemistry in order to be able to play this class. So it's very much a fun idea, catchphrase driven class.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about the let's start like big picture of this class. How would you go about describing this class? What type of player would really appreciate playing this class?
I would say it's the type of player who enjoys you know, not necessarily be doing a ton of damage or casting spells, but wants to do sort of not exactly the same stuff that an envoy does with buffing and what's the other word? Unbuffing, debuffing the enemies, but do it in a very science-focused way. Like you want to, this is a sci-fi universe, sci-fantasy universe, and you want to mainly sort of not deal with the fantasy so much and want to deal with more of the science. Let's go with that. Yeah, go with the Biohacker.
We sort of think of these three classes as falling into three broad categories, and two of them are very easy to explain, right? There's sort of the combatant category, that's where our Vanguard sits.
Okay. And
there's the spellcaster category, which is obviously where our Witch Warper sits. And then there's the not a combatant or spellcaster category, which sounds super vague, and to a certain extent it is, but that means that our drive here is to make sure that you have a class that has options that are interesting in and out of combat, that can alter the flow of play, that can solve problems, that gives you things to do that are impactful and causes you to make some decisions, and has different builds that are useful to it, that also has some science fiction, science fantasy tropes wrapped around it, that does not depend on mostly I do damage and take down foes, or mostly I have a list of magical abilities I call upon. And we could perfectly well make a spellcasting class that was like nanites and say none of it is magic, and it would still be that niche, right? That I have a list of limited use per day things. So this category is always one of the most difficult to put together. So it's not that we really think they are like the Envoy, in that Envoys and Biohackers are doing at the mechanical level very, very different things. But they both occupy that space of I have to be able to do stuff that impacts play that is other than these other obvious sections of impacting play. And that's one of the reasons why we need it to be play tested so much, right? Because this is exact, and I'm going to say that with every one of these classes, by the way. I'm going to say that's the reason why we need this to be play tested so much. Because we're trying to get it to do things that are different from what any of our existing classes do.
Okay. So then, really quick, when we're talking about the Biohacker, were there things in mind as far as the current game of Starfinder, the current rule set and everything? What sort of things, if any, were you trying to address with the Biohacker and putting that class together? Was it a thing where you're like, well, this happens in our current rule set, what if we put this into that play, or not even at all?
So early on, we were sort of looking at what we consider to be kind of the iconic roles of science fiction and science fantasy. So the Biohacker's first drive was, from a story point of view, what's going to be interesting, what goes into the game well. And there are some really good examples of not things that are Biohackers, but things that inspired us to do Biohackers. And some of that our creative director, Rob McCreary, has already written about on the message boards. But for me, one of the things about the Biohacker was always McCoy from Star Trek, who has his hypo spray. And whether you're talking about the original series or the movie reboots, right, he injects people with things to solve problems, whether that's in amok time, right? I'm going to claim that it's so that they can adjust the atmosphere, but actually I'm going to get them to fake being dead. But that is, again, that hypospray thing, or I'm trying to overcome a poison, or they're diseased, whatever it is. And we had injection weapons, which are a thing in the game that seemed obvious and cool, but we really hadn't done much with other than to sort of drop them in the game and say, hey, this is a category of thing that exists.
Right.
So we had this category that we hadn't done a whole lot with, and we had this trope, and it seemed like a natural marriage.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have that like picture that I gave you of all those injection weapons that we added more for the armory before we even had an idea for this class. You know, you've got basically things, and ranging from pistols to long arms to sniper rifles. Why not figure out like a way we can make that even more useful in the game?
Right.
And going on sort of like cultural touchstones. Speaking of sniper rifles, if any of you out there play Overwatch, there's a character called Anna who it shoots people with a sniper rifle, but also shoots people to heal them with a sniper rifle.
Yeah.
So, and that was sort of one of the things I was sort of thinking about when I was looking at this and going like, oh yeah, you want to be able to like all the way across the battlefield and like, oh no, you're wounded. Let me take care of that. Boom.
And speaking of that, kind of getting into that, what other kinds of features are we going to get out of the class? We talked about healing from afar and things like that, having a little bit of a mix with the envoy and all of that sort of thing. What other kind of features are we going to get? Hacker, I assume. Biohacker, it hacks life sciences.
Yeah, I mean, we got a custom scanner, which is like the custom rig from the mechanics sort of is designed for the physical science engineering end of things. The custom scanner, for example, allows you to take some time to have a better chance to identify creatures and to use a different set of skills to identify creatures. And one of the things that we have in the playtest survey document for the Biohacker is how satisfied were you with the way this feature impacted play, right? And so that will let us get a real feel for, did we do enough with the custom scanner? Do we need to do more with the custom scanner? Do people care about the custom scanner?
Right.
But again, going back to sort of my more grognardy touchstones, right? McCoy's got the tricorder, which is constantly... and that is also a place where there are a whole sorts of things we could do with that we haven't yet, because we want to drill down on, do we have this basic function at the right level yet? And the playtest will help us know that. And if we have to tweak it up, tweak it down, totally rewrite it, strip it out, replace it with something else, those are all places that once we have that core done, we can move in other directions with it.
Right.
And then they also have a number of scientific, well, you wrote them. Talk about the...
Sure. What, you're talking about the injections?
Yeah,
the theorems?
The theorems.
The theorems, yeah. It's like much like a lot of our classes, you have a thing that you choose every so often, like the Solarian Revelations and the Envoy Improvisations, stuff like that. We have theorems, Biohacker theorems, which allow you to alter the way you might do things with the injections, basically how what they can affect and what they can't affect. And some things that sort of physically alter yourself. There's a couple ones that basically sort of like make you've been experimenting on yourself so much that your anatomy is all weird, and now people have trouble,
So like permanent mutations?
Yeah, kind of permanent mutations, kind of, and some of them are maybe a little temporary. You can give people gills temporarily.
Okay, and you get to control these a little. Like it's not,
bit, yeah.
It's not random. It's kind of more like we're aiming for this. And,
That's what we need.
I love that.
Because a random table that gives you gills is very unlikely to be useful at just the moment you need it.
That's it, man. That chaos gameplay can be kind of fun.
I mean, the Serum of Wonder is not necessarily a terrible idea, right? Roll on a chart and see what happens to you, but that's not what we're doing here.
That was a kind of like, at the beginning, we were sort of talking about stuff like that. Like one of the Mad Scientist version lets you inject people and it's random, or something like that. So that I started working with that, but it didn't quite gel. At higher levels, you theorems to craft things that basically you can stop people's hearts. You can, what's the other one? To deaden their synapses, to make them dumb. Fun stuff like that.
Really slow them down.
Really slow them down.
Yeah, I love that. That's really cool.
And the nice thing about theorems is that it's one of the ways that we can have a customizable character, right? So that two biohackers, even if you have two Lashunta biohackers, can be very different characters with different choices of what they want to focus on, what kind of role they want to fill, etc.
Right. Okay, so then let's talk about as we start moving into the playtest and we're starting to get feedback from folks and all of that sort of thing. What specifically sort of things are you looking for? Like when you drop Biohacker into this playtest and you were like, great, we're going to get some information back. What sorts of things are you looking for? Are you wondering whether it can even fit, or are there like more finely tuned details than that, or what sort of
both
feedback?
these things are important. For any playtest with a new class, there are some crucial questions, but they fall into two broad, maybe three, but let's say two broad categories. Is it game mechanically viable, so that we already have a game, that game has a reasonably stable environment where people have learned what happens to a group when you have a Solarian? What is a soldier good at? What can an envoy do? What happens if we do or don't have an envoy? When we are dropping a new class into that environment, we very much want to know not only how does that class operate on its own, but how does it operate with the group? So within that stable environment, we are adding a potential instability, and that causes all sorts of possible combinations. And it is not possible to run through every possible combination of every class of every ability. But when we've got thousands of people doing a playtest, that gives us a lot more information than any amount of time we can reasonably spend looking at that ourselves.
Right.
So there's that game mechanically viable element. The other is, narratively, does it make sense, and is it fun? We could make a class that was perfectly balanced. I mean, we could make a class that says, hey, you've got a 45% chance of defeating any enemy, and you get to do that once per encounter, and then you're done. And that could be perfectly balanced, right? If we find the right number, but you have nothing to do, right? I pressed the button, did we win? No, I'm out. That would not be fun at all.
Right.
So, and it doesn't make any sense within the game world. So
I've just named that class for you.
What is it?
It's called Space Meh.
Space Meh.
The Space Meh.
Totally, right? And we could little green Space Meh. And so you want to make sure that nothing you do makes the class unfun or not make any sense, right? There are a lot of places where like, oh, the game mechanics might make more sense here if this, and then you stop and you're like, well, how are we defining that in game, right?
Yeah.
What is it that allows us to say this thing occurs? And that is one of the places where, especially with a science fantasy game, we really want community feedback, right? Because I can say, this seems perfectly reasonable, and if 80% of our respondents say, I hate this, it makes the universe not make any sense to me, well then maybe my opinion isn't the important one here.
Right. Well, that's a tough pill to swallow too.
I've been in the industry more than 20 years. I am well aware that my opinion is not the holy grail of game design.
Right.
I'm paid to have a pretty good opinion, but it's really important to if no one wants to play this class, or if this class makes people less likely to want to play the game, then there's no point in doing all this work to release it, right? Yeah. And these are, I'll let you talk in a minute, I promise.
That's fine.
These are
I had a whole story.
You did. One of the reasons that these things are so rough is that we have to get this feedback early enough that we can iterate, we can make new versions of abilities, or if necessary, even whole classes. So we have to get to the point where we've said, okay, we've had a couple of drafts, we've had a development pass, we had one editing pass, our publishers looked at it, right? We've all taken this moment to say, yes, this is pretty close. We know it's not done, but we want it to be close enough that we can get useful feedback on what direction we take it from here. And if I waited until we had 3 more passes and we thought it was perfect, then if there was something we got horribly wrong, we would not have time to make any changes. And that's why when this was announced, by Rob sitting here on camera, kind of suddenly.
You all remember. Yeah. That was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. It was very, very fun. That is so early that we haven't even told you when the book's coming out yet, because we have got to have the time to do all this. But that's always a balancing act. So to a certain extent, anything that seems wrong from any player is or GM is something I want feedback for. Yeah, and GMs is important too, right? If just some GM says, well, the player loves it, all the players are having a great time, and I hate dealing with this thing. If there are no GMs, then there's no game. So that's all very important data, and we've got the survey questions that ask a lot of those things, some of which are very specific, like, did your biohacker ever run out of injection uses per day before the end of the last fight?
Yeah, I can see that.
If the answer is no from everyone, no one ever ran out, then why do we have a limited number, right?
Exactly.
If everyone says yes, then and then we start getting comments, they're all gone by the end of the first fight, we're like, well, maybe this isn't impactful enough. Then you get these weird cases where you're like, did you ever run out? And everyone says, yes, I ran out. And then you say, are you satisfied with the impact of this ability? Yes, I'm completely satisfied. Oh, well, then maybe what we have is something that's super useful. But so there are a lot of variables that go into play.
Right.
What would have to apply a scientific method to all of this study?
And on that note, I think we're gonna
cancel Starfinder altogether.
That's it. Go home, everybody. It was fun. It was a good run. It really was. Thanks, Jason. Is there anything else about the Biohacker that we want to say in this video today? Before we get to Q&A.
Give us a cap.
Basically, if you like playing with scientific buzzwords in your game, and you want to be Dr. Bones, you want to be Anna from Overwatch, you want to be you want to be Rick from Rick and Morty. Check out the Biohacker.
There you go. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Let's do this. We're going to say goodbye.
We are not doing Pickle as a playable race.
Yet.
No, we're
It's still early. No one.
But haven't you seen the art for the Dralic?
I sit corrected.
Yeah, well. And then we'll do Q&A. How do we feel about that?
Sounds
Absolutely.
good.
All right?
Good.
Okay, cool. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Boy, this half hour went really fast today.
I'm highly caffeinated.
So what we're going to do is, right after this, we're going to start some Q&A. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you would like to be a part of the Q&A, we do this on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Pacific at twitch.tv/officialpaizo. First part of the show is this. You just watched it. After that, we talk to the chat and we do some Q&A. We'd love to have you join us, so feel free. If you don't know anything about this playtest that we're talking about, it's going on until January 16th, 2019. And if you'd like more information, hit that card that just popped out right there, and it'll take you to a page that should tell you all about that. So we encourage you to help us out. Help us with the Character Operations Manual for Starfinder. That's the basic idea. And in the meantime, for Paizo, and for Jason, and for Owen, and for me, I'm your old buddy Dan. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you again next week. Bye.
Bye.